The Worm of Death. It sounds like a fantastical, deadly creature that might be found in a 1950s science fiction novel like Dune. But some people believe that this elongated, murderous, worm-like creature called the Mongolian death worm lives in the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert is the largest, as well as the coldest, desert in Asia, and the fifth largest in the world, covering 1.3 million square kilometers while elevated approximately 1,500 meters above sea level. The name Gobi Desert was first introduced to the world by American explorer Roy Chapman Andrews in the 1920s. This desert covers the southern part of Mongolia, as well as the northern and northwestern parts of China, and has been given its name because it's a semi-desert, which means it's also rich in vegetation while being able to support life. So, there are many wild animals and even nomads that live within the Gobi Desert. British biologist Carl Schucker makes an interesting claim concerning the Gobi Desert in his book, The Unexplained, an illustrated guide to the world's paranormal mysteries from 2002. One of the most sensational creatures in the world can dwell in the sands of the southern Gobi Desert. It is believed to resemble a long, fat worm, up to a meter or 3 feet, long and dark red in color, with pointed ends. It spends most of its time hidden under the desert sands, but when it is detected resting on its surface, it is avoided by the locals. According to legend, the dreaded Mongolian death worm, called by the locals Olgoi Korkoi, which I probably butchered that, but that translates to long gut worm, lives up to his name. It can kill in many terrifying ways, including injecting a corrosive poison that is lethal to anything it touches, and, as if that wasn't enough, it's also said to be able to shock its victims from afar. It has rarely been seen and has never been photographed. Adventurer Roy Chapman Andrews, who was a paleontologist, does not believe in the existence of the Mongolian death worm. But he shares the stories of the worm circulating in Mongolia. This comes from an article published in 1922 in the Asia magazine and later in his own book On the Trails of Ancient Man from 1926. Then the premier asked that, if it were possible, I should capture for the Mongolian government a specimen of the Alagorhai horhai. I doubt whether any of my scientific readers can identify this animal. I could, because I had heard of it, but none of those present ever had seen the creature. They all firmly believed in its existence and described it minutely. It is shaped like a sausage, about 2 feet long. It has no head or legs, and is so poisonous that merely to touch it means instant death. It lives in the most desolate parts of the Gobi Desert, whither we were going. To the Mongols, it seems to be what the dragon is to the Chinese. The premier said that although he had never seen it himself, he knew a man who had lived to tell the tale. Then a prime minister stated that the cousin of his late wife's sister had also seen it. I promised to produce the Alagorhai horhai if we chanced to cross its path, and explained how it could be seized by means of long steel collecting forceps. Moreover, I could wear dark glasses so that the disastrous effects of even looking at so poisonous a creature would be neutralized. The meeting adjourned with the best of feeling. German naturalist Eberhard Werner Happel, who lived from 1647 to 1690, mentions in his book Curiosities of the World, which was published in 1683, of the discovery of another terrifying worm-like creature with a geological connection. A certain De La Voye observed, on an old stone wall to midday, much of the rocks eaten by these worms. The holes were big enough to put a hand within. Such holes were full of living worms and dust, which they made of the rocks. Despite the terrifying creature's reputation, many intrepid explorers have plunged into the Gobi Desert in search of the beast. Numerous expeditions have been made throughout the years, both by independent researchers and by the union of television programs. However, the intense investigations, the witness interviews, and even the setting of traps for the beast have all come back empty-handed. Many alleged sightings of the worm are reported in the 1950s. People who believe in the creature know that there is no concrete evidence of its existence, but assert that its legends and stories must have some basis in historical truth. Locals who live by the desert are certain of the existence of the worm and acknowledge the monster who roams the desert. The descriptions, mostly second-hand and third-hand accounts of different sites and times, are all too similar, leading them to believe they are legitimate, independent sightings. From a folkloric point of view, however, this is simply a sign that the legends and stories of the death worm have spread throughout the region through trade and travel. Many people around the world can offer similar descriptions of supposedly non-existent dragons, mermaids, and other fantastical creatures. All of those aforementioned creatures are regarded as having never existed. Could there be a real animal behind these stories and legends? There is no evidence of the existence of the death worm. Furthermore, none have been found alive or dead. Every other creature known to exist has left behind a dead body or skeleton. In fact, the Gobi Desert would surely have preserved the carcass of the animal due to the scarcity of predators and the hot desert winds that slow decomposition. The inhabitants of the Gobi know of the global interest in their mysterious monster, as well as the offers or rewards for one of those creatures, alive or dead. So, if any were found, it would undoubtedly come to light. A zoological perspective can help us distinguish fact from fiction in the legend of the Mongolian death worm. The creature, if it exists in the inhospitable part of the Gobi Desert, may not be a soft, fleshy worm. Instead, it is likely a type of legless snake or lizard. This also means that it would be a vertebrate animal with a spine that would presumably be found by the researchers. A variety of explanations have been offered for the animal, including that it may be a misidentified or unidentified species of snake. Among researchers, author Richard Freeman claims that the Mongolian death worm may not exist, and that the belief is based on sightings of a type of limbless reptile known as a lizard worm, or a type of boa snake. However, there is a possibility that such a creature like the Mongolian death worm might exist. After all, even Jane Goodall, one of the foremost primate experts in the world, said she was open to the possibility of Bigfoot. The Gobi Desert is a vast region, making the existence of undiscovered animal species a possibility. Additionally, there are worm species that have been known to live in the sand instead of soil, like the giant beachworm in Australia. Additionally, in worms, the circulatory system functions by absorbing oxygen through their skin and carrying it through their body, which would allow them to grow up to large sizes like the death worm's purported 5-foot length. It does seem like the sand lizard, which looks like a large limbless worm that burrows underground and grows up to several feet, or a type of sand boa snake, could have originally inspired the Mongolian death worm lore. No matter how the legend of the Mongolian death worm began, cryptid researchers have not given up the hope that someday they will find definitive proof of the existence of the death worm of the Gobi Desert. So, do you think the Gobi death worm exists? Or is it just another animal that hasn't been identified yet? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Good night.